From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, pony versus police. See who wins this war of wills. One expert fires back after seeing misinformation about a new report from the UN on climate change.
But it is other day-to-day life choices that we make that are way more environmentally harmful.
And it's the day we've had circled on the calendar for weeks, Report Day, an inside look at what it takes to put all those important numbers together.
No objective yield this year, but as I've mentioned, we really don't see that having a big impact on our ability to set an accurate yield forecast.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Happening later today, USDA releasing a slew of reports, including the crop production report, where we'll finally learn just how many acres of corn and soybeans were planted following a historically wet spring. AgDay's Betsy Gibbon talks with the person in charge of getting these numbers together. She joins us from the newsroom. Betsy, we'll see some new things in these reports.
Clinton, everyone knows this year is unlike any other with widespread weather challenges. That's why USDA's NASS branch, which conducts the crop production report every year, is making some changes to how it conducts the report, from resurveying, FSA certified acreage, satellite data, and even changes with the objective yield data. I sat down with NASS's crop branch chief to discuss it all.
To be such a widespread area and go on for so long, no, we haven't seen that before.
Words from Lance Honing, the chief of the crops branch for the department's NASS division.
Even though the problems are bigger and more widespread this year, there's some of the same problems that we see almost every year somewhere. So we've got processes in place that handle that.
A year bringing backlash from farmers upset some of the government reports are released, while crop uncertainty was still high. Honing says regardless of the challenges, the reports are critical pieces of information the federal government needs to release each year, and the dates are set in advance.
Those releases and those dates get approved all the way over to the White House, so they're critical to the government. And as part of a principal federal economic indicator report, we're also directed by policy that tells us when and how quickly those reports have to be issued.
However, just like how the weather caused adjustments to the crop, the report will have some too. USDA using FSA certified acres in this report, information we normally don't see until October. NASS wrapping up its resurveying process in late July throughout 14 states. And overall, NASS relying more heavily on farmer surveys this year.
They have declined over time. But as we look at a couple of things, I would say, number one, the levels that we're seeing at NASS, although they're below where they were 10, 15 years ago, they're still very strong.
USDA not in the field looking at years and rows, but instead waiting until the crop is more developed.
Most efficient use of our resources was to just eliminate that in August, pick it up in September. We're still going to continue to do that work. We're just going to start a little bit later when it becomes a little bit more meaningful for us.
Honing saying satellite technology will be used too, but it does have its drawbacks.
So when you use satellites to interpret yield, you're really looking at different pieces of information because you're not counting kernels. You're certainly not measuring the size of kernels. You're not weighing any ears. And those are some of the strengths of the objective yield work that we do.
Honing telling me as far as production goes, NASS has counted planted corn as planted corn no matter the usage or even if it's for a cover crop. Clinton?
All right, thanks, Betsy. And ahead of that report, others are crunching their own numbers. The latest Accuweather Forecast shows U.S. corn production at 13.07 billion bushels. That would be the lowest yield since 2012. It's calling for soybean yields to come in at 3.9 billion bushels. That would be the lowest production since 2013. And those numbers will be released at noon Eastern time. Make sure to follow AgDay on Twitter and Facebook for live team coverage as those numbers are released. We'll also be reporting on agweb.com, and we'll have a full wrap-up tomorrow morning on AgDay. Rumors of a settlement in the Bayer Roundup glyphosate lawsuit apparently a bit premature. Shares of Bayer surged Friday on reports the company had offered to pay billions of dollars to settle claims in the U.S. related to Roundup. But the mediator in the case telling Reuters, quote, Bayer has not proposed paying $8 billion to settle all the U.S. Roundup cancer claims. Such a statement is pure fiction, end quote. Now, Bayer's chief executive said earlier this month the company would consider settling with U.S. plaintiffs only on reasonable terms. And the EPA also taking steps when it comes to labeling glyphosate. EPA saying it will no longer approve product labels claiming glyphosate is known to cause cancer. Also saying in a news release, it's a false claim that does not meet the labeling requirements of the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. It said California's Proposition 65 has led to misleading labeling requirements for products like glyphosate because it misinforms the public. EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler saying, quote, "It is irresponsible to require labels on products that are inaccurate when EPA knows the product does not pose a cancer risk. We will not allow California's flawed program to dictate federal policy," end quote. Now, you may have heard about this, a new report from the United Nations looking at ways to curb climate change through changing land use. Some organizations took the report as consumers should eat less meat. But one animal scientist says that's not the case. The UN report is from the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, or IPPC, and looked at ways to reduce the impact on the climate. Frank Mitlerner is an air quality specialist with the University of California, Davis. He says the media coverage focused on the wrong path for solutions instead of focusing on eating less meat. He thinks people are being misled at what's really attributing to greenhouse gas emissions.
So going vegan for 1 year is half the impact of one transatlantic flight. So what I'm saying here is not there is no impact, there certainly is an impact, but it is other day-to-day life choices that we make that are way more environmentally harmful. And by focusing on the burger, and that's where a lot of the focus is on, we are pretty much giving the rest a get out of jail free card. And that is not where we need to go with respect to lowering climate change impacts.
According to the EPA, the livestock industry in the U.S. contributes to less than 4% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Mitlerner says that compares to industries like transportation, power production, and cement that contribute 80% of greenhouse gases. The latest on talks with China, stocks will be looking to rebound today after dropping again Friday. That's after the president raised the possibility that a meeting with China on trade might be canceled.
What happened and what's happening with China now, we have an open dialogue. We'll see whether or not we keep our meeting in September. If we do, that's fine. If we don't, that's fine. But it's time that somebody does what we're doing.
The two sides currently scheduled to meet again in Washington in September. Dozens of immigrant workers are back home after being detained in the largest immigration raid in a decade here in the U.S. The raid's happening in 6 Mississippi small towns that host poultry plants. Officials say 680 people were arrested in last Wednesday's raids, but immigration lawyers said late last week about 5 busloads of people were released. Officials had said they would release detainees who met certain conditions, such as pregnant women or those who hadn't faced immigration proceedings previously. All that sunshine really helping a lot of vegetable farmers right now. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us with today's crop comments. Mike?
Thanks, Clinton. We're hearing that all that sunshine and even the heat are helping certain vegetables like carrots. This photo taken by our own Betsy Gibbon during her recent visit to California. You can see the carrots are coming along nicely at Grimway Farms. That's near Bakersfield. Grimway is the largest organic carrot producer in the U.S., and they say they expect to harvest this crop in just a few months. Taking a look at the Drought Monitor, you can see we're starting to see dry areas. Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, the 3 eyes there. It's been dry in the southeast and it's getting drier parts of Texas, western Oklahoma, and Kansas as well. I'll have your forecast coming up.
Many opinions ahead of today's big report. Some analysis on the key numbers you need to watch for today. That's ahead. And later, police versus a wandering pony. See who won this battle of wills coming up. And we're getting ready to go on this year's Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour, and you can join us. It's all next week. Be the first to hear what our scouts learn in the field each day. Seats are available in several locations. The cost, $99 per person. You can register online at profarmer.com/register.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
From our partners at Farm Journal's Pork, a federal judge in Minneapolis has dismissed antitrust suits against U.S. pork companies. The companies were accused of conspiring to limit supplies in order to boost prices and their own profits. The judge saying the plaintiffs in the case did not show there was parallel conduct among the companies that indicated they conspired to rig prices. Now, the cases dismissed were against Hormel Foods, JBS USA, Smithfield Foods, and Tyson Foods, and data provider AgriStats. Chip Nellinger with Blue Reef Agri-Marketing, our guest here today. Chip, let's talk about this planted acreage number, because we're starting to get survey after survey come out ahead of USDA's report, and they're all over the place.
Yeah, they are. I've never seen such a wide discrepancy of opinions ahead of a report in history. I've been doing this for since 1993. Wow. It is just a absolute wild card. No one knows. My brain, I'm just a simple country boy. My brain tells me, and I've driven through parts of northern Illinois where you see 20 to 30% prevent plant in good corn ground, 230 plus bushel corn ground.
Sure.
My brain tells me as you drive through there that we have to have a big drop. Prices were on the lows. Producer sentiment coming out of winter into spring were at historic lows. Mm-hmm. So there was no incentive really to jump up and down and want to plant a bunch of additional corn acres. Now you can argue that by June 1st, corn prices had rallied, but it's hard for producers to switch. So I think that that August 12th report, it all comes down to acres. It's too early anyway in a late planted crop to figure out what yield is. But this acreage thing is a wild card. Somebody's going to be really disappointed.
Right.
You really literally have people thinking that it could be 10 to 12 million acres of prevent plant on corn, or that they cut on corn acreage. You have people thinking that it's going to be unchanged to even higher on corn acreage. Everywhere in between. So there's going to be a huge amount of volatility in the 10 minutes that come after that report.
When that number comes out, does it matter at this point? Or is it harvested acres that matter?
Well, I think both, right? Because you're talking about separate things. In my mind, it very much matters. And I think that's going to be, unfortunately, whatever they put out is going to be the number that we're going to use until the January crop report, where they usually make their final tweaks. So you're talking about separate things. Number one, that's planted. But then the harvested acreage, because of all the low-level flooding from streams and rivers, that's going to be a separate issue that probably won't be popping up until the January report. But that could be 1 to 3 million acres right there that were planted and not harvested because rivers took them. In my mind, this is totally separate. This is planted, and it does matter no matter what they say, because in my mind, that's going to be the number that the market's going to go on until January and maybe beyond.
All right, so much to watch, and just
it's going to be a wild one.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
We'll be back with more Ag Day coming up in just a minute.
Farming has changed. Markets are riskier than ever. For customized, focused commodity marketing, contact Chip Nellinger or Adam Dreyer at 309-550-7213. Join Andrew McRae for Farming the Countryside, a farmer-focused podcast that is all about production agriculture. Farming the Countryside is available wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and is brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, the world's largest provider of crop inputs and services.
The nation's weather watchers over at NOAA are ratcheting up their expectations for the Atlantic hurricane season. They're increasing the likelihood of an above normal season due to the fading of El Nino. Now, their scientists predicting 10 to 17 named storms, with 5 to 9 of them hurricanes. Now, we've already had a couple of named storms here, Mike, but
right.
I thought the interesting part was the fading of El Nino.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's barely an El Nino, it's not quite an El Nino, and it's kind of in that neighborhood. And some models are taking it down and some are keeping it a weak El Nino. So we'll see. It's a pretty weak season so far as hurricanes go. Here's the moisture that we've seen so far during the last week. As you can see, there were a few pockets of moisture, one of them in the farming areas anyway, southeastern Kansas, northeastern Oklahoma, into parts of northern Arkansas, eastern Nebraska. The dry areas, though, of western central Texas, not much. The dry areas of Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, not much either. But you can see the scattered showers and thunderstorms east coast and the Gulf Coast did produce a little bit of moisture. The really dry areas of the Pacific Northwest just continue to stay dry, unfortunately. There's those areas of moisture in the middle of the country. Again, there's some areas that had 8 inches plus in southeastern Kansas as some complexes of thunderstorms moved through. Farther to the northeast, you can, or north of that is into Wisconsin and western Michigan. Had a couple of complexes kind of dump 1 to 2 inches of rain, which was a nice rain in those areas, but it missed a lot of the farming areas from Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. Just a few places had some decent moisture. Here's the jet stream as we head through this week. We are going to start off with a ridge in the southern Mississippi Valley. Lots of activity through the northern tier of states. You can see a slight trough as we head into the middle of this week into the Great Lakes and Northeast, cooling things off, a trough moving into the west. And then as we head through the end of the week, we're going to see this ridge build back up into the upper Mississippi Valley, lower Great Lakes, lower portions of the Northeast, and then that gets cut down again by another trough as we head into the weekend into the Great Lakes and the Northeast. So some activity mainly through the northern tier of states, but that means temperatures this week going to be above normal for a good chunk of the southern states, below normal the Northeast, far northern plains, and the Northwest. Precipitation this week will go above normal for the northern Mississippi Valley back into North Dakota and parts of the Southeast. But from the southern Mississippi Valley westward, pretty much below normal. 30-day outlook for temperatures above normal southern plains, east coast, and the west. Only below normal area far northern plains, and precipitation over the next 30 days. I'm going below normal in the Northeast. Unfortunately, the southern plains that have been dry in Oklahoma and Texas, and above normal the northern plains and the interior portions of the Rockies. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. We'll head to Denver, Colorado. First of all, a mixture of sunshine and clouds, high around 88 degrees. Little Rock, Arkansas, very hot, a mix of sun and clouds, almost 100. And then you can see Dover, Delaware, partly sunny, hot and more humid, high temperature around 88.
All right, still ahead, Machinery Pete.
Hey, stick around, folks. Coming up, I'm going to tell you about 3 super nice older combines I've seen sold on recent auctions.
The 2019 Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour is coming soon. Kicking off August 19th, watch for extensive coverage on air and online. The premier sponsor of Crop Tour is Pioneer, with support from IBM, RCIS, RAM, AeroVironment, Titan Tires, Farm Mobile, and Farm Credit Services of America.
All right, folks, today let's talk older combines. Well, I've seen a couple really interesting ones sold at auction the past year. Now, in fact, a week ago Saturday on a farm auction in south central Minnesota. Now, this is the sale that had the 1979 John Deere 4640 tractor, only 826 actual hours on it, sold for $61,000 record price. Go check out our YouTube channel, you can watch that sell. But that auction also had this combine, a 1973 John Deere 7700. This thing only had 1,325 hours on it. Sold for $7,500, which is the highest auction price on a 7700 without any heads in exactly 15 years. Now, I know the guy who was runner-up bidder on it. He's a collector from Nebraska. And he said, Pete, you know, we just don't see any of these big older combines with hours like that. And of course, the 7700 was the monster of its day. Now, he said we do occasionally see some smaller combines with low hours, and that did happen last fall, September 1st, on a farm auction out in central Nebraska. This super nice 1975 John Deere 4400, only 480 actual hours on it with no head, sold for $13,000, highest auction price on a 4400 in over 20 years. And folks, I'll leave you with one more. This was from our friends at BigIron.com online auction this past April. This very sharp 1981 white 9700 four-wheel drive, 5,353 hours on it. Look how sharp it is. It sold for $9,400. That is the highest auction price on a 9700 in almost 14 years.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
It seems animals all around the world have minds of their own. Check out this horse in Ukraine. It gave police in Kiev a run around. The pony named Busya had run away from a university nearby where she was helping train veterinary students. Now her harness had broken, and so she just decided to go for a walk through the city, down busy streets, keeping police very busy. Now the police tried everything, even offering her food, she wasn't overly interested in getting a harness put back on. Finally, she was taken into custody and spent some time eating the grass behind the police station before a handler came and walked her home. Well, there you go. That's all the time we have this morning on a Monday. We're sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
AgDay's coverage of the 2019 Pro Farmer Crop Tour is brought to you by Ram Agriculture, built to serve.